The February 14th, 2022 meeting of the Evanston City Council will come to order. Happy Valentine's Day. Yes, the jokes do write themselves this evening. We'll begin with a roll call.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Wynn. Oh, sorry, Braithwaite. Councilmember Braithwaite, Councilmember Wynn.
Somewhere.
Councilmember Newsma.
Here.
Councilmember Burns.
Here.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Here.
Councilmember Ravel. Here. Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Fleming.
With 9 members present, we have a quorum and are ready to do our work. We'll begin with my public announcements and proclamations, of which I have 2 things to discuss. First of all, a proclamation declaring tomorrow, February 15th, 2022, North Shore Village Network Day. I'll quickly read it and recognize the representatives of North Shore Village who are here with us this evening. Whereas the North Shore Village Network, NSV Network, our local village, founded in Evanston, Illinois in 2010, is a member organization of older adults committed to helping one another by giving support that helps them to stay in their homes, live active, vital, productive lives as contributing members of our communities. And whereas NSV Network has over 175 active members providing volunteer services such as transportation, minor home maintenance, tech support, and friendly visitors, educational programming including climate change issues and actions, current events, recollections of the March on Selma for voting rights, financial planning, medical cannabis, social programs such as book groups, memoir writing, play reading, musical presentations, walking, and weekly dinners. And whereas during COVID-19, NSV Network worked to alleviate isolation and loneliness among members by connecting electronically for social interaction, educational programming, ongoing club meetings, and volunteer grocery shopping, 97% of members said that NSV Network helped them get through the pandemic. And whereas February 15th, 2022 has been proclaimed by Congress as National Village Day, celebrating the 20th anniversary of the village movement and the positive impact villages are having on the experience of the aging. Starting with the Beacon Hill Village in Boston, there are now more than 300 community-based villages across the country, and the village model is now established as a cost-effective, sustainable solution for healthy, vibrant aging. Whereas the City of Evanston is pleased to recognize North Shore Village Network on this National Village Day as an asset to our older citizens and to the larger community, now therefore, I, Daniel Biss, Mayor of the City of Evanston, Illinois, do hereby proclaim February 15th, 2022 as North Shore Village Network Day in the City of Evanston in recognition of the North Shore Village Network in its 11th year as an asset to our older citizens and to the larger community. So I want to just also recognize the representatives of North Shore Village, including, I have to say, their treasurer and the one-time HR director here in the City of Evanston, Judy Witt. Thanks to all of you for your service, for your work, and we very much are honored to have this chance to recognize you. Thank you very much. My next item is something that I think is important for us to do as a community to recognize someone's extraordinary service, but I also recognize that someone who knows that the hour is late and who feels like she's already been recognized and appreciated. So without making too much of a fuss over it, I just want to, again, on the second to last day of her service as a city council member, thank Councilmember Cicely Fleming for her extraordinary work, her diligent service, her fearless advocacy, and her friendship and mentorship of myself as well, and in a small token of recognition for her 5 years of really extraordinary service to the City of Evanston. I wanted to present you, Cicely, with this plaque of thanks and say how much I appreciate all that you've done for the city and for this council, and to say that I know you're not going to be far or shy about expressing your thoughts, and I certainly look forward to continuing to lean on you for advice and wisdom. Thank you so much.
Probably about the same.
And that brings us to the city manager's public announcements.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, Clerk Mendoza, Kelly Gandersky, Interim City Manager. Would like to wish everyone a happy Valentine's Day as well. And I am introducing Acting Deputy City Manager David Stonebeck to talk about the APWA's Excellence in Snow and Ice Control Award winner.
Thank you for having me up here. And actually, I'm going to turn it over to Edgar, who really does all the work. But I was remiss when I sent an email to the City Council notifying you of this award. I mentioned Edgar and the two snow commanders that removed the snow from the street, and I was remiss in acknowledging Kevin Johnson and Stephen Walker, who are the snow commanders that get the snow off the sidewalks, the parking lots, the bike paths, the pass through the parks, and all that. So they work just as hard as the other two snow commanders. And I didn't mention their names, so I had to do it here. Kevin Johnson and Stephen Walker, great employees. And with that, I'm turning it over to Edgar.
Well, Dave said their name about 4 times, so I'm sure they'll be happy now. But good evening, mayors of the council, Mayor Biss, City Clerk Mendoza, City Manager Gandersky, Edgar Cano, Public Services Bureau Chief and Acting Public Works Agency Director. As Mr. Stonebeck stated, I also oversee snow and ice operations. I just want to take a few minutes here just to acknowledge the award that we won. It is a very, very big deal in our industry. It's the most prestigious award that we can win, and it took a lot for us to get that. There was a lot of hard work that was put in administratively and also by the field staff and the snow commanders. We're going to be receiving the actual award in the middle of May during the annual snow conference, but one thing I want to acknowledge is just all the hard work that really went into this. And it's not just from Public Works. A lot of city departments help out during snow and ice, so they should be recognized as well. Community development, police, fire, city manager's office, community engagement. I mean, pretty much everybody here within the city assists. And another player is, of course, the city council. And we really appreciate everything that you do for us and all the resources that we are able to get through our recommendations to council. So the number one thing in order to be good at snow and ice and be prepared is to have all the tools that you need. Preparation is number one, and that comes with equipment, materials, technology. And these past few years, you've been wonderful in giving us the assets that we need to win an award like this. So we're very honored. We're very happy to win this award, and just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Congrats, Edgar.
Thank you so much, and congratulations. Terrific work. Next, we have communications from the city clerk.
I want to acknowledge the receipt of emails that were sent. I know some members of the community asked for them to be read in public, but seeing the time, it's not probably best to just acknowledge them. So Annie Coakley sent a letter from the Downtown Evanston Exec Board against the 518 Davis store. Catherine Lois in support of the Aspire program, as well as Maribel from the Assistant Dean of Health from Oakton Community College, and Mark Batista, VP of Workforce Development and Dean of Business Center Technologies, as well as Neil Gambo, who also sent a letter of support of the North Shore Health Systems Aspire program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This brings us to public comment. Ordinarily, we begin these hybrid meetings with public comment from those who signed up to speak in person, but I see none who signed up, and I see none in the room, so if I'm missing somebody, just wave and get my attention. But with that, we'll move to those who signed up to speak online. This evening, everyone will be given 3 minutes to speak, and we'll start with Samir Desai, who will be followed by Doug Silverstein, and then Neil Gambo. Mr. Desai, are you?
Mayor, I don't believe Samir is speaking.
Okay. Well, in that case, we'll move on to you, Doug, followed by Neil Gambo, and then Muhammad Ali.
Thank you very much, Mayor Biss, and I want to thank all the city council members as well for giving me a couple minutes today. I'm Doug Silverstein, the president of Evanston Hospital, part of North Shore University Health System. And just one slight correction is it's not North Shore's Aspire program. It's the Evanston Communities Workforce Development Program. We happen to be, I'm chairing the group, so a lot of times people think it's North Shore, but it is really not North Shore. The Aspire program is really a community initiative. And I could not be more thrilled with the support that we've had from so many partners across Evanston as we're looking to really invest in our young people and our young adults from a workforce standpoint. From our friends at ETHS and District 65, from Oakton to the Forrest E. Powell Foundation with the WE program, Cradle to Career, the Job Youth Center, YWCA, the International Career Institute, and we've also been connected, thanks to Commissioner Suffredin, with the partnership from Cook County, and so many more. It's been as wonderfully, for me, just a joy to have the opportunity to work with such great people. Joe Flanagan and the Evanston Business Recovery Task Force has been phenomenal. The members of the city with folks like our friends Nathan Norman and Paul Zamalzak and so many others. Kelly's been great, the mayor. And what we really hope to do is really engage our young people and our young adults from job shadowing to career fairs, internships, helping with certification programs and degree programs, and really with overall career pathing. North Shore is really pleased to spearhead this with a gift from our Community Investment Foundation, which some of you know that with our merger with Edward Elmhurst, each of our organizations, both North Shore and Edward Elmhurst, are committing to $100 million each to invest in our communities, which will really spin off about $6 to $7 million per year. And we are, at this point, committing to $200,000 to really kicking off our workforce initiative. Thrilled to be able to do that as a gift coming into the city, hoping that tonight we will get approval for matching funds coming from the city. And the other piece that was just really wonderful, as many of you know, Paul Finnegan and his family has a foundation. Paul's the co-president of Madison Dearborn Partners. And with the
15
approval tonight
seconds.
from the city, we'll actually give an additional $200,000 this year and again next year if there's a commitment again. So appreciate all the support. Thank you very much for the time today and enjoy the rest of your meeting. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Next will be Neil Gambo, followed by Muhammad Ali, and then Dorian Price.
Well, good evening, Mayor Biss and the members of council, City Clerk Mendoza and City Manager Gandruski. As said, my name is Neil Gambo, and I am the chair of the Mayor's Employer Advisory Council, otherwise known as MEAC. And we've been working for the last 4 years to connect the local employers with ETHS and now District 65 to present career pathway opportunities for students that technically aren't going to go to college, at least right away. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of the request for the ARPA funds to support the Aspire Workforce Development Program. Aspire is a solidly constructed, real, long-term workforce development program, not just an idea. This program is walking the walk and has committed significant resources to make it work. Employee pipelines programs like Aspire are vital to the economic health of Evanston because they offer the opportunity for our young adults and youth to gain skills leading to high-paying employment that enables them to afford to stay in Evanston. The more funding Aspire has, the more Evanston people it can bring into the program. Our firsthand experience with IKIT Summer Internship Program shows that Aspire will work. North Shore has been did an IKIT summer program with us last year and put two young fresh graduates of class of 2021 into internships and ultimately hired them. And really, this is a life-changing opportunity for these young people, as is all internships. We are proud to be on the team that developed Aspire and plan to stay engaged. This is the right use of ARPA funds and an exciting opportunity for the city to show support for workforce development and I urge you to approve this investment. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Muhammad Ali, who will be followed by Dorian Price. Is Mr. Ali in the Zoom, Luke? He is. Okay. Mr. Ali, do you hear me? Perhaps he's having some tech difficulties we can work on and pass over him for now and move on to Dorian Price.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and the City Council. The focus for my talk today, or my public comment today, centers around our culture, and that it was emphasized in looking for the next city manager in the second attempt. And so they talk about these metrics, and they have a system where they look at various factors. And so they look at change versus, and my question is change versus continuity, and what we seek in our leadership. And so culture fit is defined as the third element of the Stanton Chase leadership framework, assesses and they assess culture and strategy fit. How decisions get made and how leaders get others to achieve results in a particular team. And then is the company, this is what will be asked of the candidates or the people looking for the candidates, is the company looking to hire for change or for continuity, and which areas are the highest risk? This is probably the most important question and probably the best phrased question in terms of the whole search. And I'm not so sure that when you got input in terms from the public in terms of what they would see or characterize, when you look at this particular approach, which is extensive, if you go to the website and you look at their assessment strategy, it's extremely psychometric and it's extremely into these details of who a person actually is. And there's pros and cons, I think, in terms of that particular approach. It scares me a little bit because what it does is that it puts it in a level of so-called science, and it could exclude people you want to include, even though the goal is to include more people. So I don't know how diversity fits in. I don't know how these other factors fit in. You're trying to look for the truth versus, or at least the goal of this, versus what someone thinks, who they think they are versus who they really are, et cetera. Good old-fashioned intuition usually is good. I tend to be pretty open-minded initially, and sometimes I get snookered in. But in terms of including people, sometimes it's better to err on the side of perhaps a mistake could be made, and it's best to try to be positive as much as you can. I know this is competition for a job, but it's also a people-oriented kind of activity. And if it gets down into these metrics, I'm not so sure. And I'm pretty progressive in terms of how I look at things, but there comes a limit in terms of how we do things and what it transcends into how we act as a community, or however we act in terms of ethics, morality, in terms of the law. All of that is hooked into who we are as integrity. So for me, integrity is the key, and that's what we need to look at, but we also need to look at fit and what that fit means. If it means change, then let's commit to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The final speaker is Muhammad Ali. Mr. Ali, are you able to unmute yourself? All right, it looks like he's not available to speak at this time. And so that concludes this evening's public comment. So let's move now to the next section of our agenda, special orders of business, beginning with SP1. Would someone like to make a motion on item SP1?
I move item SP1, adoption of resolution 12R22, amending city council rules to require members of city boards, commissions, committees, and committees to be vaccinated or test regularly against or test negative in advance of any in-person meeting.
Is there a second? Second. Councilmember Reed moves passage of item SP1. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? We begin with Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, one amendment that I think needs to be, or two, but one that needs to be made to this is the requirement here requires that a member of a committee test negative within 24 hours of a meeting. I think the requirement should be a weekly test requirement, similar to what staff, so if they test negative within a week of a meeting, rather than just 24 hours, that would allow for folks to, one, take a PCR test as opposed to a, the non-PCR test, and presumably if a member of a committee served on, there's a member who's reimagining police committee and then they serve on a subcommittee. If both those committees were in person the same week, they'd have to test twice within that week rather than just testing once, which is the standard for city staff. So I would like to update that and have that apply also for all of the rules across the board.
I see Mr. Ogbo has come in. Do you want to address that question?
It wasn't a question, really.
Okay. Well, let's back up then. Are you making a motion?
Yeah, so I move that we amend the rules here to move this testing requirement from within 24 hours to within 7 days test negatively. And that would also apply for council members and the clerk.
So two things. One, if you could put that in writing, especially in light of that last comment, which I didn't fully follow. I think Mr. Cummings has a response as well.
I just wanted to point out that the language is identical to 10.7, which was adopted by the City Council at the last City Council meeting for 24 hours of in-person. So we can certainly make the amendment to be 1 week, but the City Council rule has already been, we passed a resolution at the last meeting to make it into the rules. So that would require an additional resolution at the next meeting if we wanted to change 10.7 as well as the proposal for 5.4.1.
I would disagree with that, but thank you.
So to be clear, your point is that that amendment isn't germane to this topic and therefore there's an OMA violation?
No, what I'm saying is the language that's proposed here is identical to what the City Council approved for itself the last time. And so that resolution has already been passed and adopted, and the rules are now published on the city's website. So if we want to change those that particular rule to match what is being proposed for 5.4.1, that will require another legislative action.
I would.
I guess the question is, what's and you're suggesting that legislative action couldn't come as an amendment to the thing before us?
Yes, because it has not been noticed to the public that it was coming for City Council.
Point of information, we had this discussion when we had our OMA experts come to the Rules Committee that just because an item isn't directly on the agenda, I mean, we're talking about COVID restrictions, it's related and thereby would not preclude us from amending another rule related to COVID restrictions.
It certainly may allow the motion, and we'll just take it up with the PAC. I'm not going to debate with Councilmember Reed, but the issue is that it's not noticed on the agenda. We can change 5.4.1, but it requires another legislative action to change 10.7 because City Council has already adopted the rule for 10.7.
Understood. I am not. I'm going to go with the Corporation Council's ruling on this, and I don't think the policy of we'll resolve the dispute after the fact by checking into the public access counselor is the most prudent way forward. So I would entertain a motion to amend the the changes to 5.4.1, but if there's a desire to change the other section that was not noticed, I would ask that we do that at a subsequent meeting with proper notice.
I highly think it's, I don't think that motion is out of order at all. And I mean, again, we're changing a rule that would only apply to council members. And it's, again, it's clearly noticed that we're talking about rules relating to COVID. There would be seemingly no restriction that would not allow us to make a small amendment to another rule that has to do with COVID that would put us more in line with what the rules are for city staff in almost every other jurisdiction that exists in the state and nation, that you test once a week. That's all. But if that's your determination, I still will take it up with the PAC office and be disappointed if I wasn't able to access, to use what are my rights as a council member to make a motion under our rules. But I will adhere to your ruling, Chair, and send the amendment that I'm requesting.
While Councilmember Reed sends over the text of the amendment he's proposing, is there any further discussion on this item? Councilmember Revelle.
Well, just a point of information. So is that in fact the rule, the regulation for city staff, that the test be basically a weekly test?
That's right. So the issue here is that the thing that we do is really different than what staff does, right? Staff is in many cases expected to come in on a daily basis, be in touch with folks on a daily basis, and to have them test for every day that they're on the job interacting with people is extreme. And so the reaction is, okay, let's test once a week. For us, and to a pretty great extent for board and committee and commission members, the expectation is not they're always on the in-person part of the job. And so the question is, what's the sort of analog? And so the idea is to test specifically for council meetings in our case, or BCC meetings in their case. I'm not here to say that one day is right and 1 week is wrong. It may well be that 1 week is right and 1 day is wrong, but it's kind of an apples and oranges situation, because the rule for us in BCCs is written for specific events that are on the calendar, and the rule for staff is for an ongoing employment with essentially daily in-person contact. Councilmember Kelly.
So I know I can be here many days a week, and I'm at the high school, and the rule is once a week too. It seems kind of crazy that we'd have people testing every 24 hours before they come to a meeting. I mean, it seems like why would we do that? Why wouldn't we just do whatever we have to do to amend it so it's once a week? I mean, that just sounds a little over the top.
Yeah, I'm not hearing a lot of opposition to Councilmember Reed's amendment up here. There's just this OMA question of, do we make the change for BCC members tonight and council members at the next meeting, which is playing it safe with OMA, which is what I prefer to do. The other side would say, hey, don't worry about playing it safe with OMA and just pass it for both tonight. I'd rather just be careful, because I don't think that the consequence of sort of having this conversation out in the open, choosing the kind of envelope pushing option, and then being slapped on our wrist by the Attorney General is a very attractive way to approach it. I'd rather be cautious on this one. Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, and making sure we don't do something that results in our committee members and commissioners being tested even more often than they would otherwise have to. So if they meet monthly, does that mean every week they need to be tested, as opposed to one time, 24 or 48 hours?
A week within the meeting is
a week from now. Okay. Yep.
He's just saying test before every meeting, just like it says now, but give you a week window, not a 24-hour window. Is that right, Councilmember?
correct. Yes.
Why a week and not 48 hours? Which is
That's
most
the
tests. Most of the tests now are you can get within 48 hours. So why a week? It just leaves more time where
you'd be covered for a week, as opposed to if you have 3 meetings in a week, one on Monday, one on Thursday, you'd be covered for that week, and that's the same standard that staff and
Well, we've
quite-
already established that it's different, so I'm looking at this within
Well, because
context of this
you're-
discussion. But keep walking through it in the context of this discussion.
Right,
You're
and
saying,
the context is
one.
staff and every other employee for every other business that's showing up to their place of employment on a regular
So
basis.
you're saying that a committee member who is meeting more than once in a week, it would be better for them to, I don't even know if that's happening, but let's say it is happening. You're saying that it's easier for them to just get tested once as opposed to once before every meeting? Is that what you're
Correct.
saying? Okay.
And then having that apply also to council members who do show up. You know, I'm on just about every committee here every day, or could potentially be here, 4 days out of the week, 3 days out of the week.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense for council members. Okay, thank you.
And also, to be clear, that would allow for PCR tests to be done if someone so chose, and that's a more accurate test. A week. All right, that amendment has been shared with Mayor Biss.
And so just to be clear, council members, so your email describes 5.4.1 and 10.1.1, and you acknowledge that I'm accepting 5.4.1, but not for the purposes of this evening's meeting, 10.1.1?
Yeah, I acknowledge that, but still I would like to make the motion, but again, acknowledging that you're denying it.
Right. Is there a second for Councilmember Reed's motion?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it? one
Sorry,
more
so
time?
the motion is to amend the testing requirements for board, committee, and commission members so that they have to occur within a week before a meeting as opposed to within 24 hours before a meeting.
And I'll second that.
Is there any discussion on the amendment? Council Member Fleming.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit semantics, but I think my concern is you test a week before, you're still out in the community for a week, and you're unvaccinated. And so, given that our boards and committees, we have a lot, and sometimes they're hard to get a quorum already. I don't know if we're doing still virtual or not options, but I guess I'm concerned if folks are testing a week out and coming to a meeting, whatever, 5 days later, and they've been potentially exposed, like, are we doing all we can to make our boards and commission members feel comfortable, given that they're volunteers? Some might have, other health concerns, and already, again, we already have a hard time finding a quorum in some cases. So I get that 24 hours is a pain, but I also get that, people are making a choice not to get vaccinated, which is their choice. And so if you're going to come and be around other people, I think it does not hurt you to get a test 24 hours so that the people you're engaging with also feel safe with your participation. So I would object to this just for that reason. I think our staff are a different situation, and so I don't want to compare those two. But if you're, we all are living in a new kind of world now with the COVID, and so if you're making some choices, then just like we all have to wear masks, we have to do different things to make sure other people are comfortable as well.
Council Member, I believe it was Reed, followed by Burns.
Yeah, just to respond to Councilmember Fleming's question, I guess I'll just say that same person, who might feel uncomfortable, our staff, people who we pay are under the same requirement. They're going out and about during the week. They may be unvaccinated. And again, we are paying that person, and that same committee member would be in a similar situation, regardless of if it's another committee member or a member of our paid staff or a police officer or whoever we're paying to be out in the community. So I think if that standard's good enough for someone that we pay and is an employee of ours, that standard should also be good enough for someone who has graciously volunteered their time to serve their community.
Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, my issue is similar to the one that Councilmember Fleming just described. I mean, it complicates it, but if there was something that applied to people who are meeting, more than once because they sit on, like what was being recommended now makes sense for council members because many council members are on many different committee meetings a week. But for our BCC committee members and commissioners, unless that applies, I would prefer to see someone get tested 48 hours out than a week out potentially. unless what you're saying applies to them, which they happen to sit on more than one committee, which I don't think should be happening that often anyway, per our rules. So that's my hang up. I think it makes sense for council members. It makes less sense for BCCs unless, they're meeting frequently. So I would entertain a motion if this fails for like 48 hours, because I do think there are some tests that take a little bit more than 24 hours. Could you speak on that, the PCR test? Thank you, Director Ogbo.
Good day, members of the City Council. Ike Ogbo, Director, Health and Human Services Department. To your question, yes, there are currently two tests. You have the antigen test, then you have the NAT test or the molecular test called the PCR test. Nowadays, it does take about 24 to 72 hour turnaround time for that type of test. The antigen test is quite a quick test, but it's not as sensitive as the PCR test, where it's about 10 to 15 minutes where you get the results of that test.
Thank you. So I think something like 72 hours to me would be more in line with, I think, what you're trying to achieve as it pertains to the commissioners and committee members.
Okay, well then, I am happy to amend the motion to 70. I think we should keep it a week, and I will also say that the Rule 10.7 seems to only apply to council meetings, to city council meetings, and this rule seems to apply generally to boards, committees, and commission meetings. And so I think, and given that we have very clearly set the precedent that our that our council rules do not apply unilaterally to all committees, I think amending this to say within 7 days would also cover council members who are attending committee meetings and not council meetings. A council meeting would still be 24 hours. Committee meetings would be 7 days for whether it's a council member or a member of the community. No, I think that makes it quite simple.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's a good point. One thing I didn't catch, though, did you say you're making a different motion, or are you
No, I'm
sticking?
going to keep it at 1 week, so I'm going to keep it as I sent to you.
Okay, there are no more lights on. I just wanted to offer Director Ogbo the opportunity to give any additional thoughts on, I mean, the amendment that's about to get voted on is the 24 hours versus 7 days. Do you have any other information that could be of use as folks decide how to vote on this?
Well, the 24-hour test was put in place specific to the meetings that will be held by the boards and commissions. And what it does is capture any recent infections that individual might have prior to coming into that meeting, which, if that individual tests positive, that individual won't attend that meeting. So the purpose of the 24 hours, in essence, is to capture a recent infection, particular to that meeting. And I know that the argument has been, okay, staff are required to submit weekly COVID tests, but that's an entirely different environment than the meeting, so to speak, where staff, they might not be as in close contact with these individuals, they might not be in confined spaces, they might be out in the community keeping their social distance, whereas in a meeting setting which might be a bit confined, you are more inclined to be in close proximity to individuals where you can spread the virus. So that's the reason why we drew that rationale.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion.
If I can, I guess, briefly
Councilmember
respond to that. I hear what you're saying, but our staff are in this room with us, just as close to us as anyone else. And that happens in the committee room settings. We have city staff who are able to detain folks and put them in a car with them, and similar effects. So there are many instances where our staff members, just like a volunteer committee member, are in close proximity to folks. And I think having the same rule apply across the board for anybody who is engaged with business with the city, whether you're an employee or a volunteer or a semi-volunteer council member. I think having all of those, having a uniform set of rules makes sense. And also I would think that having the PCR test would be better than having a far less accurate, kind of rapid test. Being able to give folks the option of getting that PCR test would mean more accuracy, as well as we're required to wear a mask. And specifically, I think I requested that the language said KN95 mask would be required. I think with those protections in place, we're achieving what we want, particularly as these guidelines are about to be, disposed of by the governor.
Thank you. So I'd like the clerk to call the roll, and this is the roll is being called on Councilmember Reed's amendment, which moves the requirement from 24 hours before a board committee or commission meeting to 7 days before a board committee or commission meeting. Yeah, so the thing in your packet says you got to test 24 hours before a BCC meeting, and now we're about to vote an amendment that says not 24 hours, but instead a full week.
Well, this particular amendment wouldn't be in line with the one that we have for City Council, so I don't know if that's going to have to change. So this current amendment, if we are going to amend this to a week to get the test, it's not in alignment with the council member protocol that we already have in place. So I just wanted to...
I'm not sure how that's, the alignment is relevant to this conversation, because we are saying there are two different discussions, and that was part of why I couldn't even make the motion for fear that it would violate OMA, because they were separate issues. So just, I think what Councilmember Braithwaite...
Well, so let's let Director Ogbo continue to answer the question.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that for council members, it is 24 hours. If we make any amendment to what we currently are discussing, that will be a week. So it's just not in alignment with each other. And to what Nick stated earlier, there's just a conflict there. So I think that's something that we'll have to take a look at. If we're going to do it for boards and commissions, then it's something that I think we should consider for council members if this is something that we're going to do, so it's all in alignment.
Does that answer your question, Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Burns?
Yeah, I just have one last question for Council Cummins. The vaccine testing requirement on council, does that only apply to city council meetings or also committee meetings in your interpretation?
Good evening, members of City Council, Mayor Biss, Clerk Mendoza, City Manager Gandersky, Nicholas Cummings Corporation Council. The way that the rule 10.7 is worded, it only applies to city council meetings. It does not apply to standing committees, the way that it's currently worded.
And 5.4.1 as proposed here it applies to committees, so I imagine it would apply to council members sitting on committees, including standing committees, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, with that, would the clerk please call the roll again on the amendment to proposed 12R22?
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Nguyen? No. Councilmember Newsma?
No.
Councilmember Burns? Councilmember Sufferton? No. Councilmember Ravel?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
No.
With 3 voting in favor and 6 voting against, the amendment does not pass. This brings us to the now unamended 12-R-22. Would the clerk please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I have one more amendment.
Councilmember Reed?
My second amendment was to put an end phase on this. We have not decided that. We know that the governor, in a few weeks, folks are going to be able to show up here with no mask. And so, how long does this policy go on? I think we should tie it to the governor's actions relating to COVID-19. I don't know, Director Ogbo, if you have something to state there.
Director Ogbo?
Yes. So the mask mandate, which hopefully if our leading COVID matrix are continue to improve, would be lifted come February 28th. And that does not have any relationship to us taking COVID tests on a 24-hour basis. It does not have any relations to that. Although a number of mandates are being considered to be lifted, but this is not something that has been instituted by the state. This is something that has been instituted locally here in Evanston. And until we enter a phase where it's an endemic, the protocol or policy will be in place until then. And honestly, we don't have a timeline as to when that's going to occur at this point.
Ms. Gandersky?
And not to compare apples to oranges, but for our personnel rules, this has been adopted as a policy, and it runs in perpetuity. We don't have an end date for our vaccination policy for staff.
Councilmember Nusma.
I think Councilmember Reed does make a good point, is that, hopefully we'll be out of COVID sooner or at some point. My proposal would be to, when we get to that point, revisit our rules and eliminate the requirements at that point.
Yeah.
Rather than try and figure out how to phrase it so it can kick in automatically. Let's just revisit it when the time is right, and I don't think anyone would have an objection to deleting the rules at some future date.
Absolutely.
And I'll just add to that. It seems, I think Ms. Gandersky's point is really important here. It seems to me that this policy is parallel to our employee mandate, not to a mask mandate for the general public, not to a vaccine mandate for the public to go to a restaurant. Those are kind of extreme exercises of power in the situation of an emergency. But an employee mandate is one that's been imposed by tons and tons and tons of employers across the country, and this is very much analogous to that. And I think we shouldn't have them in perpetuity, but I think they should roll off at the same time. Councilmember Burns.
I actually don't have anything to say about this. I don't know if it's officially a motion, but I have something after it. Yeah.
All right, sorry. So you make a good point, Councilmember Reed. Did you? I guess you sort of alluded to something, but didn't necessarily quite make a motion there.
Yes. Well, hearing the discussion from the committee on that, I'm not going to make a motion on that particular move. But I do think, for this, to a point that you made, this isn't parallel to the staff proposal in that, we're having different testing requirements for our volunteers than for the folks that we actually pay handsome salaries to go out into public. And so I think, it should be in closer alignment. And I'm surprised why you wouldn't want folks taking PCR tests, which are more accurate than, some at-home test that would be valid under this policy. And so creating that week allowance would have done that.
Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I do think it is reasonable and in our best interest to change to have a policy that says 72 hours. Correct me if I'm wrong, Director Ogbo, but that the piece in the requirement for city staff, it specifically calls out that it must be a PCR test, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It does call for it to be a PCR test. But given the frequency by which meetings are being held, it might not be practical to get a PCR test. I mean, if we are meeting in boxing commissions 3 times, 4 times a week, that would be quite impractical because there is a turnaround time for PCR tests, as I mentioned before, about 24 to 72 hours. The antigen test is still a good test. It's still recommended by CDC. It's just that the sensitivity is lower than a PCR test.
Okay, I mean, if you're comfortable with the antigen test as opposed to 72, if the recommendation from you is that we, right, as a body, if some of us are taking tests and others, or even for boards, commissioners and committee members, is that is the recommendation that it be a PCR test, or are you fine with it being an antigen test?
So I'm fine with either test. I mean,
Okay.
if you're able to get a PCR test within 24 hours, that's fine. If you're able to get an antigen test, which of course you can within 10 to 15 minutes, that's also fine as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please?
I'm sorry, I have one more
Councilmember
question for
Reed.
Director Ogbo. This is, I mean, we're making these rules and let's make it right. Director Ogbo, are there, I haven't been able to find any research personally, but is there research in the particulates that are expelled from someone's nasal passages or whatever, and how many of those get through versus, if you're vaccinated, if you have a mask on, if you're vaccinated with the mask? Do we know, the kind of particulate spread in those different scenarios?
No, I don't have this particular information on that, but all I know is that both vaccinated and unvaccinated can still spread the virus. But the difference here is for those who are unvaccinated, what happens is that they suffer more severe illness, hospitalization increases, and even deaths. Here in Illinois, just the past month, 90% of individuals who are unvaccinated occupied our ICU beds and COVID beds. So that's why it's paramount, it's very imperative for people to get vaccinated.
But as far as spread to other folks, so you're just unaware of the differences in, vaccinated versus mask versus vaccinated with mask?
There's still a possibility, even with masks, that you can spread COVID. There's still that possibility. But like I mentioned, the difference here is the severity of the illness for those who are unvaccinated. The recent research from CDC is recommending K95 masks, and I know you mentioned that, because it provides more protection than the cloth mask. In regards to particulate matter and the spread and the speed of it will be something that I'll have to do more research on, and I can provide you that data, or I can provide you a link to a CDC.
Yeah, I'd just love to know the difference between being vaccinated alone, wearing a mask alone, and then mask and vaccinated, particularly with the particulate spread, because that's what we're trying to control for. We don't want folks to spread COVID to other folks. Folks can, make their own decisions about their own health care, and, live with those consequences. But, certainly we don't want folks to spread it. And, understanding those differences, I think, will help guide whatever policy comes, is forthcoming. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll? This is now a roll call on SP1, which has not been amended.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
On this matter, there are 9 voting in favor and none voting against, and item SP1 passes. This brings us to item SP2. Would someone care to make a motion here?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move item SP2, Resolution 15-R-22, authorizing the mayor to execute the engagement letter with Stanton Chase to conduct the city manager search for the city of Evanston.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Newsma moves item SP2. Councilmember Kelly seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
In this matter, there are 9 voting in favor and none voting against, and item SP2 passes. This brings us to the consent agenda. Would anyone care to remove any items from the consent agenda?
Item P1, please, is failed in committee.
Item P1, you said failed in committee, so will not be coming up this evening.
If we could remove A14 and A15, which will be brought back with a request to suspend rules.
Oh, thank you for that. So far we've got A14, A15, and P1.
Can you remove ED1, please?
ED1, yep.
A2, please.
A2. So far we have A2, A14, A15, P1, and ED1. Anything else? Last call. All right, would someone like to make a motion on the consent agenda except for those 5 items? Councilmember Braithwaite moves passage of the whole consent agenda except for items A2, A14, A15, P1, and ED1. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
In this matter, there are 9 voting in favor and none voting against, and the consent agenda, save for the 5 items I mentioned, has been adopted. So this brings us to item A2. Councilmember Reed, would you care to make a motion here?
I move item A2, approval of the BMO Harris Amazon credit card activity.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves item A2. Councilmember Fleming seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Mayor, just point of order, if I can note, since we're meeting here in person, we can do voice votes.
What's that?
We can do voice votes since we're meeting in person.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just think,
Okay.
personally as chair, I prefer to do it this way. I wouldn't judge anyone who handled other committees differently, but for me, it keeps my mind clear about how things are operating.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming. Sufferton, sorry.
I abstain.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
In this matter, there are 8 voting in favor and none voting against, and so item A2 passes. Would someone like to make a motion to suspend the rules to allow votes on both items A14 and A15 for introduction and action?
So moved.
Second.
Was the motion from you, Councilmember Braithwaite? So Councilmember Braithwaite moves suspension of the rules to allow for introduction and action to both occur in tonight's meeting for items A14 and A15. Councilmember Newsma seconds. Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, I just want to be sure, are we suspending the rules so that this would not have to go through the referrals committee? I hear that folks are saying that item A14 is administrative. I would beg to differ because it's changing the fee for a license and moving it from $2,800 to $500, and I'm fine with that as long as we're setting the precedent now that if I come to this council with a change in fees for any item for a license, that also would not have to go through the referrals committee and could come directly to council without going through the referrals process, because it's one thing to assign licenses, which seems administrative, but it certainly is a policy if you're changing the cost that we charge for a particular license.
I think rather than adjudicate this question that I think is pretty, I would argue, certainly in a gray area, I would just say I would entertain a motion to suspend the rule to allow that. I personally would not characterize this as a policy change, but I don't know that that's I don't know that it's constructive to offer a blanket guarantee that nothing involving fee changes also counts as a policy change. And I think if folks are uncomfortable, let's just suspend the rule.
Earlier. So should we play it safe?
So let's play it safe and suspend the rule. But I think Councilmember Ravel has something to add.
The main I'm having really trouble with my frog in my throat tonight. The main purpose of this change to the Class S liquor license is actually not the fee. What we're doing is going back to the way the code was written in 2020, which prior to 2020, sale of alcohol was limited to members of veterans organizations and their guests. And at that time, we changed that. We said it could be open to members of the public, and therefore we increased the fee from $500 to whatever we raised it to that we're going back from. Because the idea was, well, gosh, it's going to be, open to many more people, therefore we should increase the fee. So what we're now doing, because that actually was in violation of our zoning code, we are going back to the 2020, pre-2020 version. It's been through the Liquor Commission. I don't see this as a policy change.
So, first of all, just as a matter of housekeeping, I don't think this discussion is really germane to the motion that was made by Councilmember Braithwaite to suspend the rules. So let's start by taking a vote on Councilmember Braithwaite's motion, and then I would recommend that someone move that we suspend the rule to allow item A14 to move forward, notwithstanding it not having been heard by the referral committee. Though I'll say my own view of this tracks Councilmember Revell's. Mr. Cummings?
I just wanted to point out, Mr. Mayor, that the motion was to suspend the rules. It sounded like almost generally, it wasn't a motion to suspend Rule 20.1. So you could proceed based upon how the motion was worded, to Councilmember Reed's point.
That's a good point. All right, thanks for that. So now we don't need to do the second motion. We should take a vote on this motion, and should it pass, we've then addressed both issues.
Yes.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin. Okay. Councilmember Revelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
Councilmember Fleming.
So if I remember the rules correctly, the motion to suspend the rule regarding the referrals committee, that aspect of the motion is passed, but of course, the motion to allow introduction and action requires unanimous vote, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the motion fails. Councilmember Revelle?
One reason I'm asking for suspension of the rules to deal with this tonight is because this applies to the American Legion, and their liquor license is about to expire. And so we are trying to get the code to reflect what the license should be for. So it's really a time-sensitive issue to to get the liquor code back to the way we want it.
So why don't I propose, Councilmember, that you begin by making a motion, the more detailed motion that Mr. Cummings pointed out we didn't have in the first place, the motion specifically to suspend Rule 20 point, help me?
20.1.
I'll save some time. I'm going to be voting no without the clarity, so.
Well, Mr. Mayor, to your point, the rule's already suspended with respect to having a 10-point.
I get that, but I still have the right to vote no on, the other suspension. So A15 can go ahead. Seems reasonable, but A14 is certainly a policy change, and I'm going to be voting no. We're going to have to start following the rules and apply them equally, or have a clear understanding of what they are.
Councilmember Fleming?
I was just going to make the point, to Alderman Revelle's point, the bigger issue, I guess, because I remember changing the rules for the VFW and all that, but it seems to me that if that was a violation of our zoning, and that was back in 2020, I mean, I guess just for the record, it should have taken us 2 years to realize we had a violation of our zoning, right? So I realize that there's some urgency to this now because their liquor license is expiring, but it seems like shame on us or shame on staff or whoever's in charge of such things to know that we changed a rule 2 years ago and we're just now realizing that it was in violation of another rule we had. So I sympathize with them. I actually probably think it's more like Council Member Reed said in terms of a policy change, but I do sympathize with them, but it seems like I don't know that we should be making a habit of suspending our rules based on an error that we made that was 2 years old. And I realize we're in a pandemic too, but kind of a big snafu on our part.
So let me just, I'll call you in a second. I'm just trying to understand, Councilmember Reed, what is it that you're requesting that you're not, that's not on offer here? Because the rule that concerns you has been suspended. And so we would not be acting under anyone's interpretation in violation of that rule because it's been suspended. So given that, what is it that you're looking for?
I just reserve the right to vote no on suspending the rules. I agree with what Councilmember Fleming said. I don't think we need to make a habit of suspending the rules, and I think we need to be clear on what our rules are overall. If I came to this council with a proposal, instead of this being a business entity and I wanted to change the fee rates for some fine or ticket that residents in our city are issuing, I think that would be seen as a policy change and would have to go through the referrals process and everything else. And it seems that certain council members and certain special interests within the city, even if it is the VFW and they're good, folks, get American Legion, if it seems like they have a different path of getting stuff done. And so until we can figure out how to create one single path where all members have equal rights on this body, then I'll exercise the rights that I have.
Councilmember Kelly.
So I think maybe there's a misunderstanding. So this is the fee that they were charged in the past for members, and during the period of COVID, there was some modification made so that it could open more to the public. So the fee was jacked up in 20, and now we're just saying that now they're going back. We're requiring them to only serve to members. So it really is administrative. It's not a policy. So they're not being charged a new fee as a members organization. We're going back to the old fee that they were charged prior to the modifications that were made during the intense COVID period of time where it was opened up to the public. Is that, and Alderman Ravel, correct me if I'm right? So it's really administrative. There's nothing different here in policy.
I'm seeing underlined, whenever there's something in an ordinance that is underlined, that means that is something new. So there are crossed out and underlined items, which means this is a change to an ordinance that is changed to a policy.
It's what I just said, whether there's
Okay, I think it's, I don't agree with Councilmember Reed either, but he has the right to his opinion and his vote, and he's made clear that he's not going to change those, so I think we should move forward.
I will change it for A15. I'm happy to vote for A15.
Right, so I would propose that we do two things. Number one, suspend the rules for item A15, and then vote tonight to pass it, and then vote for item A14 on introduction. That creates a bit of a calendar challenge with a 2-week delay, but I don't think it's one that's insurmountable. Mr. Cummings. In that case, I would entertain a motion doing any of the stuff that I just talked about.
Mr. Mayor, I will move A14 for introduction.
Is there a second? Councilmember Newsman moves item A14 for introduction only. Councilmember Ravel seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
On this matter, there are 9 voting in favor and none voting against, and item A14 passes. It'll be back on our agenda on February the 28th for action. Now would someone like to make a motion to suspend Rule 20.1 for item A15 only?
Mr. Mayor, I make the motion to suspend the rules to allow A15 to be introduced and acted upon this evening.
Councilmember Newsma moves to suspend Rule 20.1 to enable introduction and action to occur tonight for item A15. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
On this matter, there are 9 voting in favor and none voting against, and therefore Rule 20.1 is suspended. And this now allows us, would someone like to make a motion on item A15 for introduction and action?
Mr. Mayor, I will move item A15, ordinance 12-0-22, amending the city code to increase the number of Class I liquor license holders from 2 to 3. And this is for Dollop, DBA Dollop General Store and Cafe at 1508 Sherman Avenue.
Councilmember Nusma moves passage of item A15 for both introduction and action. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns. Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
On this matter, there are 9 voting in favor and none voting against, and item A15 passes both for introduction and for action. This brings us to item ED1. Would someone like to make a motion on item ED1?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move item ED1, Aspire Evanston Community Healthcare Workforce Development Program in the amount of $200,000 of American Rescue Plan Act funding.
Councilmember Nusma moves item ED1. Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Fleming.
Sorry. I removed this, again, another, I'm sure, fine idea, but we have continued to tell people that we're making a process and a plan for the rescue funds, and I granted, I missed some meetings. I don't think I missed that one. And so I guess I'm just, without like an overall plan, concerned about this spend. It sounds like North Shore and a resident would put some money into it, so even without the rescue funds, maybe they would still do that because they think it's a good idea. And I know we just promoted Mr. Norman to do workforce development, and so it would be nice to see like what his kind of overall plan is. And so we know if we're putting $200,000 here, if he's going to have another ask. I know that Daryl presented about his, not fellowship, but workforce program that he has in the water department. So it would be nice to see more of a comprehensive plan for workforce, and then allocate the rescue funds accordingly. So that, again, people, if there's anyone else up there who has a workforce idea and they're like, hey, I didn't know we were accepting applications or doing funding for workforce, they had a chance to come forward too. Just seems like a more transparent way to allocate funds and make sure we're doing a more comprehensive plan for workforce, since we all can agree it's definitely needed. So that's why I will be voting no, but again, hope that, North Shore or the resident who committed funds could still do that, because that would be, I think, $400,000 that would go a long way.
Mr. Cummings?
I just wanted to respond to Councilmember Fleming. The contract is written as such that the commitment of the dollars from North Shore is there regardless of the amount committed by City Council.
Oh, great. So then there's already $200,000 whether we do anything, and then I didn't hear the details, nor do I need to, by the gentleman who was going to, I think there was a commitment tonight. So I will be voting no, but hopefully they will still give their money, and that would be great.
Councilmembers Suffredin, followed by Burns.
Yeah, I guess this question is for Interim City Manager Ganderski. Do we have a comprehensive workforce development plan? And if we don't, is there a timeline where we might?
Yes. Nathan Norman is working on a project management plan that will be shared with council shortly. He's been meeting with various city partners and developing a more comprehensive plan to bring forward to probably the Economic Development Committee in the near future.
Okay. Well, I agree in large part with Councilmember Fleming. I think the appropriate time to allocate the $200,000, if that's what we choose to do, is after we have a comprehensive plan. Otherwise, as we're doing these piecemeal, and in the memo, it even telegraphs that we're going to be asked to do this again in 2 weeks for other projects, like we're undermining our credibility in terms of when we do have to say no to people. So I would advise that we vote no tonight or hold it and wait for a comprehensive plan, and that's when we can talk about allocating funds. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, this is challenging because, I will vote for this, and I hope, I think there's enough support up here. It might even be enough support tonight, and I wish I could vote for it, but I would be contradicting things that I've said over and over, which is that, because we don't have a lot of up-to-date plans, and it's something that we need to work on, The only thing we're really going off of, and I've heard other council members talk about this, is programs, like storefront modernization programs. Hey, we have these programs already. We can just keep doing that. Well, that's a program. That's not a plan. And the only thing we've done is create categories. Again, that's not a plan. That's a goals. And I think even just having a conversation between all of us on definitions so that we're all on the same page about what goals are, what programs are versus what plans are. And I think if we could figure that out, we can move a lot quicker on this. I wouldn't be against bringing in a project manager for our ARPA funds. I know other cities have done that. I didn't think we would need that in the beginning of this discussion, but more and more I feel as though that could be helpful, because what I'm looking for in order to get behind anything is just some plan, some conversation about strategy, not just goals, not just working off of existing programs, but some conversation around strategy. I've asked for it through email and in many different ways, so I would love to hear either from City Manager Gandersky or Mayor Biss about how we're going to approach creating a plan around how we use ARPA funds.
Next is Councilmember Reed, followed by Councilmember Nusma.
Yeah, I am curious, Manager Gandersky, and you seem to be the only person here that can answer this, I guess. I know that we have a few projects with ARPA. I know we have $1 million in ARPA coming up pretty soon for the AUX, and then $2 million for Northlight coming up, so that's $3 million. Aside from that $3 million that has not yet been approved, but has every indication that it will be likely approved by this body, how much have we spent in ARPA thus far, minus that $3 million?
Actual spend, I don't have the numbers in front of me.
It should be we have a website or a webpage that was supposed to have the up-to-date numbers?
We do, but our budget and finance manager just left, so I'm in the middle of trying to replace a dwindling workforce. So we are working on updating our website. I do plan on having a comprehensive report out to the council this week. I was hoping to have it out last week, but we're still finalizing some information. If there's any further questions on I'm just going to go back a little bit. On these economic development items, Councilmember Braithwaite is the chair of economic development
I'm
and
the
was,
chair.
and asked that these items go forward. There was some urgency with regard to this particular item because North Shore needed to get the partnership agreement done in order to guarantee the funds. So we were asked to bring this forward with some urgency from North Shore, and Councilmember Braithwaite chose as chair to hear this on the agenda, if I'm not mistaken. And Paul Zalmazek is on the line that can speak to this item in particular. If there's any further questions, Paul, are you here?
I am available. If you'd like me to speak for just a minute, I can, or I'll answer questions if there are questions.
I do have my version of an answer to Councilmember Reed's question. By my score sheet, and it's caveat, it's my score sheet, it hasn't been audited. Council has committed $15,677,500.
That sounds about right. And so that is 75% of the money that we received already, that we had received in 2021. And that is, Mayor Biss, you're probably better at this in your head faster. That's like 45% of like all of the money that we are going to receive for ARPA. Let's just get a grip on, handle on that we have spent, a third or more of the money that we're going to receive. And so, while I think this particular program is good, and I think in economic development I voted for this. I didn't vote for some of the other spending. I want to double down on that, at this point we've essentially committed ourselves to not having an orderly process and to just doing an ad hoc ARPA spending, and that is, if that's a process, that's a process, because that's what it seems like it is given the amount of money that we've spent without really thinking about it. And to switch paths now would, I think, be bad policy.
So we're going to continue first with those who haven't spoken yet, which will be Councilmember Newsma, followed by Ravel, and then go back to folks for a second crack.
I will just echo what has already been said. I have requested for several months now a more strategic and thoughtful approach, a plan, if you will, on how we're going to address our ARPA-related decisions. I feel like I've made my point on that, and we are where we're at now. And as Councilmember Reed said, if we don't have one by now, maybe it's as good as it's going to get. And so I'm prepared to start spending the money rather than keep asking for a plan.
Councilmember Ravel.
Yeah, well, I would agree that quite a few months ago, I think we all expected that we would have a grand spreadsheet and we would really know how we're going to allocate all the money sort of in one go-around. But that's obviously not the way it's proceeding. The Economic Development Committee, though, has been meeting and vetting the economic development proposals. So I think we've sort of suggested that was a process. So I am prepared to vote yes on this Aspire program. It has tremendous community support from a number of really great partners in the community who are ready to jump in and make this initiative a success. The city's commitment of ARPA funds is key to leveraging $200,000 from a generous resident. So it is very important that we come up with our part of the funding for this program. I think it's a really well thought out initiative and has every indication of success. And reaching to District 65, District 202 students, and then also really intentionally providing opportunities and training for young adults ages 18 to 25 or whatever it is. I think it's really hitting all the groups that we are continually concerned about reaching with workforce training and opportunities. So I'll be voting yes.
Councilmember Kelly.
So we do have over over $20 million. That's a lot of money. So I am going to continue to ask that we do form an organized, that staff or, that we look at some organized fashion so that it doesn't at least appear that we're shooting from the hip anymore with this money. I will not support this for that reason. I think we really do need to, with remaining funds, approach this in a more organized fashion. Thank you.
Oh, Jesus.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's so hard to sit here and listen to the recycled question. Paul, I want to say 3 months ago in economic development, we reinvented the wheel and we talked about our process of how we fund and vet a project. I think it'd be helpful, Paul, to send those notes that we all went through and everyone cheered and clapped and said that's what they were waiting for, and maybe even show the video from that meeting. And I'll sit and watch it and try to carve it out where everyone was in agreement, where we went through a checklist of the things that were important for funding. So I am ready to support this. I think it's a wonderful initiative with a hospital, bringing much needed jobs to our community. And let's circle back by the end of the week so we can find that tape and remind everyone what they supported before. Thank you.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes, I've been a member of Economic Development Committee for a very long time. And while I understand that we would all like to know exactly where every single one of these ARPA dollars is going to go in advance, but this money has arrived. These proposals are rolling in. We had several meetings here of the council in which we determined what buckets that we would have. Those buckets didn't go into great specification, but there was agreement that that's generally where that money was going to go. We didn't have large disagreements on the amounts or in each of those buckets. Of course, these economic development proposals have come forward because ARPA was passed months ago. We've had these proposals at Economic Development Committee for several months. We all have agreed that workforce development is one of the most important issues here in Evanston. It's an investment in our future. That's exactly what this ARPA money has been designed to do, to invest in our economic future. Here it is. Here is a plan right now, and it's not that expensive. It's $200,000. That's relatively small. We have our hospitals joining in on this. We have the university. The types of jobs they were talking about are so far beyond. I mean, yes, there's healthcare, but there's HVAC, there's plumbing, there's all kinds of finance, business side, all kinds of job opportunities that are available right here in our own community, and this Aspire program starts that. Unfortunately, this council, there's a word my grandmother used to do, fiditzel. Fiditzel meant you just sat there and didn't get anything done. Here's an opportunity for us to get something done. And also to the other members of the Economic Development Committee, that meeting was 4 hours long. We
December
discussed,
1st, and I pulled up the notes when you're ready.
We've had multiple long, thoughtful, productive meetings about how to spend this money. Yes, we have the AUX coming up, and we have Northlight coming up that have come forward with incredible amounts of detail in terms of what the value will be to the economic health of Evanston. Their investments in Evanston. If we continue to just wait and debate how many days in advance our board and commission members need to be rapid tested or PCR tested, that was a half an hour of our time. When are we going to say prioritize the time of this council? When are we going to do that instead of spending 35 minutes on that issue? Yes, it's a valuable issue. Did it need 35 minutes of our valuable time? No. I am really prepared to move on this because, frankly, I have no idea when we'll ever get to it at the pace and the fiditzeling that we do here. I have no idea where it comes from. My grandmother spoke Yiddish and about 5 other languages, okay?
I think it's appropriate.
Please, let's move this forward. Northlight has been ready to go. They know what the economic impact is. We had restaurant owners, we had business owners, we had business leaders come and say, get this going. We know this is proven. I'm a member, one of the few members of this council, I think the only one, who was here when we voted on the movie theaters. That was so dramatic in our downtown. All of us, many of us lived here in what happened. Within a year of when that movie theater, the movie theaters opened, they sold 1 million tickets. 1 million. So let's get going. I think we have a sense, we have the buckets. We know what we're doing. Where are the other projects that we might spend this money on? These are the ones that we know will prove out. These are not wastes of our money. Let's get going. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you. So now actually everyone has spoken once, so we'll go to folks asking to speak a second time, which will begin with Councilmember Burns, followed by Nusma, Braithwaite, Suffredin. And Councilmember Burns, you have 3 minutes and 15 seconds left.
Yeah, the Economic Development Committee meeting that is being referred to, I don't think I was on there because I would have said the same thing I've said at every meeting. I'm frustrated too. I sent an email, and I won't say who because I'm not trying to name call, but I sent an email after the last Economic Development Committee meeting anticipating that we would actually be potentially approving more than just this ARPA recommendation today to say, look, here's a suggested path where we could get something down before that meeting so I can vote for it, and did not receive a response at all. And so I'm frustrated too. This should not take that long, which is why if I would have known it would have taken this long, I would have made a motion to hire a project manager, because this does not take that long. I could do it if I had the time, right? Like, so whose job is it to make sure that we have a plan for ARPA? And
We're trying to hire someone, we're trying to hire for someone for that position, and we have not been able to.
So we got to roll with who we have. And so what I want to make clear is that if categories are a plan, then let's vote on it. And if that's the best that this body can do, then vote on it tonight. And if that is successful, then I will support everything that we see that I agree with based on that plan. But I'm not even sure we've adopted that as our plan. But if that is our plan, those buckets, that exercise that we did, then call the question tonight on it. If it passes, I will approve, everything else after that based on that. That is our plan. But we haven't solidified anything right now.
Ms. Gandersky.
It's my responsibility to move this forward, so I'm just going to say that. And I have tried my hardest to do that. We have met time and time again in a special city council meeting to talk about the ARPA plan. We've put together 10-page memos. We've had community members bring proposals forward for discussion. We had the buckets approved, and the last time that we were here, I begged council to approve the buckets. Approve this forward. Not everyone's going to agree on everything. I know other people had ideas. There shouldn't be $7 million for economic development and $3 million for social services. No one on council can agree on anything fully, which I totally understand. There's 9 different opinions and 9 different communities represented here. Staff has spent countless hours. Mr. Zalmazak, Ms. Flax, myself, one of our interns, and even Mayor Biss has been invited to those meetings where we sat and we roundtabled the buckets and the different policy considerations with regard to each bucket. While there have been a few $1 million committed, there hasn't been, the vast majority of the ARPA funds have not been spent. We've talked about the buckets and the allocations. And even with this proposal, the full amount that was given the nod by council of the $7 million for economic development will not have been spent with this council voting on this item tonight. So these things are rolling forward. We did try to hire an ARPA specialist to kind of project manage this entire initiative. We have not been able to hire anybody, and that's not from a lack of trying. We got 1 applicant out of the whole posting, and that's just one issue we're having. We are on multiple recruitments, and we're actually set to go over budget on recruitments this year because we are having difficulty finding people, qualified people to do the job. So I'll take the blame if the council feels that I have not moved this forward, and the buck stops with me. But in my mind and sitting here over several meetings, I really do feel that we did the best we could to come up with a consensus from council and to push forward these items. And if Councilmember Braithwaite wanted these items on the Economic Development Committee agenda as the chair, that was his prerogative. So I suppose that if the council is unclear as to how these items got pushed forward, the chair of that committee wanted these items on his agenda. And I remember him clearly stating at that special city council meeting we had in December, and these items will be on the Economic Development Committee meeting because I am the chair. So that's how this was pushed forward. That's not to say we don't have other initiatives coming forward for the Early Childhood Council. Ms. Flax is working on that. We have affordable housing initiatives coming forward. We have CARP initiatives coming forward. All of these are going to be coming forward through committee. I just don't have the ARPA specialist. We hope to have the project manager, if you will, hired on. We had hoped to have that person hired on already. So with that, I'll stop talking.
Chair, could I quickly respond to that?
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Just as far as I understand, the position we were looking to hire was more around compliance in ARPA, not a project manager. I want to be really clear here because we discussed that position, but it was compliance.
Both.
It was a person that was going to lead and shepherd forward these projects to the right committees, and to also help the applicants or the community members vet their proposals, because another complication that's happened is the final rule for ARPA came out in January. So we did our first reporting January 31st to the U.S. Treasury. The final rule has changed slightly some of the requirements, and they're ever evolving. And we fully expect after an audit from the federal government, some of the requirements might change again. So this is I've spoken to many other communities. Not everyone has allocated the funds. And in some communities have allocated the funds just to one thing that they're pretty sure they won't get dinged from the federal government on. I think Evanston, in my opinion, is doing a really good job in diversifying its portfolio on this between social service initiatives, CARP initiatives, affordable housing, economic development, which is exactly what this was supposed to do. But the most important thing it was supposed to do is combat COVID, which we earmarked those funds, and we also earmarked funds for revenue loss.
I just want to be clear. I don't remember ever discussing a project manager position, and even what you described, most of that is compliance and not project management. Because if we did go out to try to find a project manager, I would hope the next time we try, you just inform all of us. We'd certainly push the job out there. I don't think it would be difficult to find a project manager for this city to do this work. In fact, there are other places that have a similar position. I don't think it would be as difficult to find that as a city manager or some other position right now. So, but again, I want to be clear. The only thing I remember this body discussing or being aware of was around a new hire for compliance in ARPA, which is not the same thing.
Next is Councilmember Nusma, who has 4 minutes and 25 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just clarify my earlier comments. I'm fully supportive of this particular $200,000. What I'm still a little bit frustrated on is not actually the Economic Development Committee, because we have at that committee discussed the criteria by which we would be evaluating economic development proposals. But I still bemoan the lack of an overall plan to address each of the buckets we defined. And unless I am wrong, which is entirely possible, we never actually voted on the bucket allocations. It was just discussed, and we left it. We didn't have a vote.
And point of information, my recollection, if it can be corrected for this point of information, is that the reason that we didn't vote on those buckets, which would maybe put us in a better place now, is because we had an overcautiousness about OMA. And I think we need to understand what the heck is in OMA so we can make the decisions that we need to make, so we can not be in positions like this, because it was listed for discussion, but we could have voted on it, and that's why we didn't. And so we need to be a bit more, we need to stop I'm sorry, can you teach me the new word again? Fiditzeling. We need to stop fiditzeling with OMA and do things that can help us move forward.
Next is Councilmember Braithwaite with 4 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These are just my couple of points of information, and as we are all here recycling inefficiency, I hope to provide just a little bit of clarity. On December 1st, myself, Councilmember Kelly, Nusma, Burns, as well as Reed, sat through economic development, and with our Economic Development Director, Paul Zalmazak, created the framework for what we called vitality measures. And maybe as I read these off, you may recall, if you were the one that listed this criteria. Yeah, you were there. We were all there. Out of that meeting, we identified critical measures being hiring local, climate, that was probably you, Councilmember Nusma, public health, personal finance wellness, job training workforce, opportunity to create well-paying jobs, career path opportunities, I don't know who said that, jobs created, jobs retained, property tax generated, that was me, sales tax generated, that was me, other local tax, amusements, liquor, etc., up to 25% of funding, typical maximum public investment, equity skin in the game, salary income levels, equity of jobs, i.e. help make Evanston affordable, SROI, social return on investment. Who said that? Burns, that was you? Thank you. And then a preference priority for local ownership, MWBE. We all clapped hands and decided that that was going to be our framework on how we were going to measure a successful project coming through economic development. Another just point of information, what we normally do, something is generated in the community. It comes to our committee for discussion before it's put on the agenda. And then typically it'll come back, and I think this had 2 readings. I also recall saying at that meeting, you were right, city manager, so you don't have to take the blame for anything. when we had the groups came in front of us in the public and made their presentation, I asked us all, what other questions do we have for the Aux? I asked us all, what other questions do we have for Northlight Theater? Crickets. I said, let's make sure we put it on the agenda. I encouraged all the groups to reach out to all the council members, and I'm not going to start calling any names, but you were all contacted by all the groups. They gave their presentation. You voted on those presentations at the last economic development meeting. So that's how they get here. Simple workflow. You got to put it on the agenda, and then you all have to vote. And guess what? If you don't vote it on the agenda, if it doesn't pass on the agenda, then it doesn't end up here on the council packet. So that's how it gets here. So there's no surprise. No one should be surprised. No one should question the process, especially because everyone sitting on behind this dais who sat on economic development had an opportunity to vote. I even remember some of you, Councilmember Byrd, saying, I'll vote it to council, but then I'm going to vote no, which you'll have the right. In a second, we'll just take the vote. But I think to continue to tell our public that there is no process when you yourselves engage in that process is not accurate. And I just hope at the end of this discussion that we'll just call the question, you tell your voters where you stand on this issue. It's really straightforward. So I'm ready to support this. I think it's a great partnership. The hospital has done an excellent job outlining very well-paying jobs. I read the criteria that we all put together in the framework, and we should move forward with this. Thank you.
And Chair, just really quickly as a direct response, members absent December 1st at the Economic Development meeting, among others, but council members, Councilmember Kelly and Councilmember Burns. So I have been very consistent with my feelings about this.
Next, with 4 minutes and 20 seconds, is Councilmember Suffredin.
Thank you. I'll just say, I don't want to get involved in the back and forth. I think the prudent thing to do is have Nathan Norman come up with a comprehensive workforce development plan and approve this then. If people disagree and vote tonight, that's their prerogative. I do have to ask, especially since we're going to be talking about a theater at our next meeting, and Councilmember Wayman, I've heard this, it's 1 million tickets sold in a year, that first year of the movie theater. What is the number that you're citing?
The first year the movie theaters were fully open, they sold 1 million tickets.
Okay. That's like a verifiable fact. It sounds like a lot. I mean, it could be true. It's been a long time since I've been in it.
You know what? We can go back and check. I didn't believe it either when we first got it, but we heard it, and it came here to the council. 1 million tickets were sold.
Okay.
Now, I could stand corrected, but I would not have made that up.
No, yeah, I'm not accusing you of making it up. I'm just wondering, we must have some sort of record, or Paul, I don't know, or would that be like a amusement tax thing we could look at from the first year? I don't even remember when the theater's open.
Yeah, we'd have, good evening, members of the council. We would have to go back in our records and download like an amusement tax collection and have that be the proxy for number of tickets, because I don't believe we had many other amusements at the time.
It might have been also in the press. I mean, it was a well-known number.
Okay.
I mean, none of us could believe it either. But
it's a detour. I don't want to, this is more for next week's discussion when I'm sure, or 2 weeks from now when we're talking about a theater, and likely we're talking about ticket sales as part of the reason why it's worthy of the public investment. Paul, if you could put it on your list of many things to do to help track down, or Kelly, if you would assign that to whomever is the appropriate person. Because I think it's a relevant thing when we're using it as a reason to support or not support things.
Councilmember Suffredin, I mean, the movie theaters opened, the Northlight Theater is not the same size as those movie theaters are. So my point is the movie theaters were an overwhelming success. I don't, to Northlight, I don't know how many tickets they're going to sell. I don't know that they'll have movies showing multiple times every day.
Well, I'm not saying that they're going to sell a million tickets. I'm saying if we're going to use past investments by the city as a reason to make future investments, we got to make sure that we're looking at the true actual numbers, because otherwise we're all just guessing.
Well, Northlight actually has a study that shows how much a theater goer, a live theater goer, spends when they go to a live theater performance.
So I'm going to respectfully, anticipating that this discussion may come up on an agenda at some point, I think let's reserve the North Light discussion for.
I just want to be very clear. I'm looking for numbers on ticket sales in the first year of the movie theater. Please. Thank you, Paul or Kelly.
So next will be Councilmember Reed with 3 minutes left.
Yes, thank you. Counting votes, I see where this is going, and I think I'm going to put it over the edge and allow this to move forward, potentially, because if we are now committing that the process that we have gone through for spending 45% of the money is the process, and we're, Cowboy Sams and Sally's out there just shooting from the hip, I'm fine with that. I said for a while that I think ARPA is not as much money as we make it out to be, and I think we're very
by the city council, and until that is
Mr. Silverstein, you might want to mute your Zoom.
And so since that is the process that we seem to be operating by, that is a process. It may not have been the process that I think many of us envisioned, but to Councilmember Braithwaite's point, it went through committee, and so I'm hoping that all of us are going to be able to now, as other ideas are moving through committees, that we'll be able to look at a proposal at its face value. Is it good policy? Does it achieve the things that we want to achieve? And vote for it based on its merit, and no longer use the excuse of we got to figure out a process or we're not, So with that, I'll support this. Nonetheless, while I think we should have figured out a process, I think this is a good project, and looking at it through the lens of what we're now saying is the process, it makes sense, and so I'll go with it as long as those who have been saying that are going to commit to keeping that same energy. Thank you.
Councilmember Burns with 50 seconds left.
And like I said, if this is approved today, again, I support the project, and I would hope we bring back the bucket process as our official kind of ARPA plan, if we haven't already, let's adopt it, and then that'll be what we go off of. But I was under the impression when I brought this up on many other occasions that there was something else that we could do that could provide a bit more detail and strategy to how we direct ARPA funds. I think some of those discussions have happened in Economic Development Committee, but they haven't made their way back to the full council to be recognized and voted on by the full group. So again, whether this is successful or unsuccessful, I would like to see either that plan, the bucket plan, formally adopted by this group, or a clear indication that we're going to go in a different direction to create that plan.
Thank you. Seeing no one else seeking to speak, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen? Aye. Councilmember Nuzma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
No.
Councilmember Sufferton?
No.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming?
On this matter, there are 5 voting in favor, 4 voting against, and therefore item ED1 passes. This brings us to call of the wards, beginning with Councilmember Kelly.
Board meeting this Thursday at 7 o'clock. Hope to see y'all. Hope to see lots of First Ward residents there this Thursday, where we'll look at in depth a little bit of the historic downtown Evanston, with special guests from both the Preservation Commission as well as from Evanston History Center. Thank you.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
No report.
Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Nuzma.
March ward meeting will be Tuesday, the 1st of March, 7 p.m., place TBD, and office hours in March will be the second Saturday, as usual, March 12th at Berry Pike Cafe, 10 to 12.
Councilmember Burns.
No report.
Councilmember Sufferton.
No report.
Councilmember Ravel.
Just a reminder to 7th Ward residents that I have a ward meeting on Wednesday this week, 7 p.m. And back in December, when Councilmember Fleming announced that she was going to be retiring early from her seat on the council, I had signed off from the meeting before she got to call of the wards, and so I didn't get a chance at that time to say how much I've really enjoyed working with Councilmember Fleming, and in particular serving with her on the alternative 911 response committee. She's been just a terrific chair. She recruited just an amazing committee that really represented important array of expertise that were really helpful to the committee. I'm certainly looking forward to continuing to work with her going forward, because there's still a lot to do on that whole issue. And then I also have certainly followed her work as alderman in the 9th Ward, and she's the community engagement initiatives and community building initiatives, I guess is the way I'd phrase them, that you've carried out in your ward are just remarkable, and you're leaving really big shoes to fill for your successor, and I wish you all the best.
Councilmember Reed.
I was here on that evening, and so I certainly said my piece then, but also I'll just add now, knowing that you're not a huge fan of this kind of thing, I'll just say again, thank you for your service, and thank you for leaning over and nudging me whenever you thought appropriate. I appreciate the reminders of my loquaciousness, as Bill Smith has dubbed me. So with that, our ward meeting for the 8th Ward, and I will say, we have an 8th Ward meeting. I think we may have to reschedule that. We'll figure out the timing changes, and that will go out hopefully late this week on exactly if and when that meeting will be rescheduled. And I'll say 9th Warders are welcome to come to that meeting, in the absence of Councilmember Fleming. The 8th Ward will welcome you. With that, I think I end my announcements, and thank you.
Let the annexation begin. Councilmember Fleming.
Yes, so as I said last time, thank you so much to the residents of the 9th Ward. They continue to be the best residents. So I'll just remind them that on Thursday, the mayor is hosting a town hall, I'm assuming on Zoom, I can't remember the details, for the brave people who are looking to sit on this council for the next 2 or 3 years, whatever the term will be. So please, other 9th Warders, participate. And as we have talked about per Alderman Ravel's reminder of our community building, that we are kind to one another. So please be gentle to the folks stepping forward. To my peers on council now and prior, although I probably disagree with you more than I agree with you, I will say that I realize that no one's up here for the paycheck. And so I always applaud people who are willing to put themselves out to the service of the community. So hopefully you all will get past whatever Alderman Nguyen's word is that I won't try to say, and get some more stuff done in the next 3 years. I will continue to participate with Councilmember Ravel in the Alternatives to 911 response, which is actually moving along quite nicely thanks to Senator Peters and other folks in the state. So that's very exciting, as well as guaranteed income. That seems like it's moving slow as mud, but we are almost through the IRB process at Northwestern, and so we will be back before you all to talk about that last final step there to get those cash payments out to our citizens. So anyhow, it has been a pleasure and a pain, but I am going on to greener pastures and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. Just do want to follow up procedurally on Councilmember Fleming's point. The applications to be a the next Ninth Ward council member. The due date was given as today, and so someone applied as recently as 6:54 p.m. tonight. You still have 2.5 hours if you want to get your application in. And there will be a public meeting that will be held here in this room, and of course also on Zoom on Thursday evening at 7 p.m. And there's also a webpage online, easy to find, where folks who want to send questions can send questions. As has been said, the next council member is going to have big shoes to fill, but also a great role model to learn from. And thank you again, Councilmember Fleming, for all you've done for the city. With that, Councilmember Newsom is recognized for a motion.
Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel and litigation. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session and are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act as set forth in 5 ILCS 120/2A, sections C1 and C11.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Newsma moves that the Evanston City Council resolve into an executive session. Councilmember Reed seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sefferden.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion passes. And at 9:21 p.m. on February 14th, the Evanston City Council resolves into an executive session to begin immediately.